Okay, so again, my name is Amanda Gelber. My pronouns are she, her, hers, and I am currently focusing on when games and activities aren't enough, and we're really focusing on combating loneliness and finding a sense of belonging. So I do have some resources throughout the way that I'll give you, but also if you really want to do extensive reading, which I enjoy because I'm a total nerd, but if you're looking for extensive reading or more resources, I highly, highly suggest that you look into Brene Brown's research and the Attorney General of the Surgeon Attorney. Nope, can't get that right. Anyway, he wrote a book about loneliness. He was the Surgeon General. There we go. When Obama was president, he also wrote a book about loneliness. And I'm going to ask that everybody keep themselves muted. Sorry. Okay, we're really going to get started now. So Priya Parker, Brene Brown, and whoever was the Surgeon General during Obama's administration, they have wonderful resources on loneliness, being authentic, and being vulnerable, and how to gather. So we are going to be focusing mostly on gathering today and finding intentional practices for student engagement. So I actually am focusing on this for my dissertation. I am a first-year doctoral student at Wilmington University, and I'm super excited and super passionate about this work, and I've been doing it for quite a while now. So, McDaniel College, where I work in Westminster, is a small liberal arts college. We are about 40 miles from Baltimore, and our enrollment is around 1,700 for undergrad students. And we typically have about 575 to 600 first years per year. We have about 70 organizations, and then we have a really cool paraprofessional group of students called engagement peers. So they come into our office and they work with us and our student organizations and help us plan programming and give people truly a personal feel with their programs, and it's peer-to-peer, which is really important at our institution. So what we're going to talk about for the next few minutes is we're going to go over what are the factors of sense of belonging. How do we break down like loneliness and collaborate with each other? And then I'm going to show you some of my intentionality practices through a chart and a mind map. So both of those things are really helpful to me and my students. And then if we have any questions that I can try to take at the end. So we are going to talk about how college students need to be engaged with each other for holistic success in regards to learning, academic performance, and involvement. And to fully matriculate, student engagement is absolutely directly connected to that. I'm sorry, I'm a little nervous for some reason, so I'm feeling a little scattered. So I did want to just also say that in the chat, what I would love for everybody to do is please feel free to write what you think a factor is in influencing a sense of belonging for different students. So thank you for your support. I totally appreciate it. So what we're looking for in the chat, if you feel like you want to, I'm just looking for what do you think influences a sense of belonging for students on campus? Social safety, absolutely. Finding peers with similar values, religion, community, being seen, faculty and staff that share identities, discussion, initial connection, perfect. So all of these are absolutely accurate. And I really appreciate all of you participating. So what we're going to focus on today, though, is the few factors that I'm actually looking at for my dissertation. So we are going to focus on sense of belonging factors that include loneliness, identity factors, including pre-college factors, and academic burnout. So all three of these things are highly impactful in a student's experience on a college campus. So a sense of belonging occurs for students when they find strong support systems. So when they find professors, mentors, or peers that they can share different values with, different discussions, and when they're able to find extracurricular activities through those connections. So it's really important and awesome when students find those places where they feel they belong, they feel safe, they feel respected. So when students struggle to find that sense of community or aren't coping well with the transition to college life, they often start to struggle with loneliness and depression, which are strongly tied, or they can also start to struggle academically. So if they struggle academically, it doesn't necessarily mean they're not understanding material. It could mean that their loneliness or their anxieties or depression are focusing, or they're focusing so much on that, or they're unable to get out of that block that they start to suffer in the classroom. So maybe they're not engaged in class discussion, maybe they aren't absorbing information. A lot of different things can influence academic burnout. So students, what's also a really important thing around identity factors and pre-college factors is students have vastly different life experiences before and when they get to college. And a lot of those pre-college factors are typically out of their control. So when they're coming to college, they can't necessarily change or completely break out of the mold that they might be a first generation student. That's a pre-college factor that they have no control over. That parents or guardians socioeconomic status also can be a pre-college factor that students cannot control. So it can be a very grueling, complex transition from going from high school or a family structure into college. So all of these factors highly impact a student's way of adjusting to college, matriculating, and finding a place where they feel they belong on campus. All right. So if anyone has any questions, I have time that I can answer those, but those are the three major factors that I am looking at. It is also really important to be really respectful and open to learning about all of the different identity factors between marginalized students and privileged students. Privileged students are looking more for a fun place where they connect with each other. And while marginalized students are looking for that, in order to find that, they need respect and safety. So if they don't feel respect and safety, they aren't going to settle into college life finding the same peer structures. A lot of times students who are marginalized also feel that they just don't have a lot of people that look like them. They're not well represented, and they start to sink into the loneliness, depression if they can't find peers with similar values and interests. And the last thing I'll say about the identity factors that's really important is oftentimes minoritized students say or feel like they are the only one. And when that happens, it's really hard to want to go out and get involved or find something that you could, or a student could find, I guess, grasp onto or become part of a group, because they're just not feeling respected or safe. So hopefully my nerves are starting to calm down a little bit. I've never been so nervous for a presentation. That's just the truth. So I'm going to talk about ways to break down loneliness and collaborate. So there's a lot of things that I've listed here. And what I think is really important is that we find ways to be super intentional. We find ways to assess what students need. We welcome authenticity. We work with other departments. We focus on inclusion and honoring student identities. We collaborate with students and groups and leaders across campus. We use gaming when it's appropriate. And then we meet students where they're at, which is super, super important. And then that we break traditional models when it comes to programming. So I know I've said a lot there, but my practices have been highly successful when I've been intentional and I've assessed what we're doing. So the intentionality piece, I'm going to dive into a little bit deeper in the next two slides. Those are important because we want students to feel a sense of belonging on our campuses. We do not want them to just go to an event, sit there, and then leave without anything learned or any type of feeling where they felt they connected with another human being. We want to encourage students to talk to strangers or talk to students they don't know on campus. We want them to see each other. We want to encourage the behavior that if we are leading by example and we're saying, look to the person next to you and talk about A, B, or C, and then look to the person on the other side of you and talk about that. By us showing and encouraging connection and communication with each other, they're more likely to continue that behavior at a later time. So that intentionality is super, super important, because without it, you can throw any singer up on a stage. You can have any bingo virtually or in person. But if there isn't that intention behind it and you're not finding ways to connect with different groups and have varying identities, they won't learn from it. They won't find that same sense of belonging. Some students are lucky where they'll connect with each other randomly and then they create a friend group or something like that. But what we're finding, especially in the time of a pandemic, is intentionality is the key piece behind anyone connecting with each other. So that isn't just for students, that's for staff and faculty as well. I have found we have created groups on my campus for students and staff and faculty to come together and talk about real topics that have intention. So some other pieces that I've mentioned here. So every time you go into an event, and it can be meticulous, but the practices I use as the director of student engagement with my staff and my students include being really calculated in how are we connecting students to each other? How are we focusing on inclusion and identity? How are we making sure that we're not just throwing up traditional models of programming and not necessarily looking for pieces that connect each other, connect one student to another? So by working with other departments and student groups and leaders, we have been able to do this. So I'm going to switch over to my next slide, which breaks down a chart about being intentional. So this is the model I use. This model is straight from Priya Parker. She's kind of a rising star in the research field, but she's been researching for 20 years. And she is a conflict management. She kind of negotiates with people about purpose of gathering, and she works with conflict, and she's really powerful. She recently did a really great podcast with Brene Brown on her Unlocking Us podcast. So what I use is this intentionality chart. So with my students, I ask them, create a chart, create a mind map when we're developing our programs that focus on these elements: specificity, uniqueness, and is the event disputable? And when we do that, it creates a bold gathering. So I put two events that are pretty popular on our campus on this chart. And I want you to think about a time where you've held an event and it's gone really well because you thought of how to connect people. Or I want you to think about a time where there was an event that might have went really well with attendance, but you may, as a student leader or as a staff or faculty member, felt that there wasn't a ton of intention behind it. So two really popular examples that I'm going to talk about are bringing like a magician to campus. This can be a comedian, a singer-songwriter, anything like that. And how are you going to make it intentional with a specific purpose that includes these three ingredients for bold gathering? I'm also going to talk about just a simple novelty, street signs. That was one of the only things during COVID we've been able to bring to campus. So, and I also want you to think about, you can do this for virtual events. You can do this for hybrid events during the pandemic. It's been so much more difficult to reach students this semester, whether you're on or off campus. And I think we're all feeling that. Student groups had a really hard time organizing events and meeting this year so far. And I don't really see that changing as much in the spring, but the goal is, with this intentionality behind it, to try to encourage students to do that. So our gathering type that we're going to talk about right now is a magician. So when you're bringing a magician to campus or a student group is saying, hey, we want to bring this magician, the purpose is simple. We just want to bring an entertaining act from off campus to campus. Pretty simple. But why? That's the question. And that's how you start to connect each other and connect students to each other and the act. It's not just about the student who may randomly come. It's also about all the other components that are coming together, all the different departments that are coming together. Why are they coming together? So it's questioning why all the time. And it can be, as I said, meticulous. It's a little nerdy at times. And then there's also those factors where you might not know what your purpose is. And then you want your purpose to be your bouncer. You want your purpose to drive your event. So I love the bouncer line. It's straight from Priya's book. But she says that whenever you start to lose focus, you use your purpose as the bouncer of your event. If it doesn't work for your event, then you might not want to use that. So we're going to go back to the chart now. So bringing students together to enjoy a show is a basic, boring purpose, but you are trying. So what we are looking to do is make the shift to the specific, unique, disputable event for a bold gathering. So you'll have multiple alternatives when it is considered a bold gathering. I absolutely am about to describe the disputable part. So, and that is confusing. I've had that one has been the hardest of the three concepts because the first two are pretty self-explanatory. Disputable is that not everyone will agree in this, not everyone will walk away with the same thing. It means in this that there are multiple alternatives that people will come out of or will get from this. So that's why there's two or more parts in the last column of this chart, because to create a space where students can bond over a shared experience with peers they may not know. That's disputable because not every student or small group of students that come to the event will get that experience. But what it could give to another group of students is an alternative to alcohol or partying. So the disputable piece just means that you're looking for multiple alternatives that students could walk away from, but your major purpose is still the same. So you're still creating that space. You're still bringing that magician, but what are the students getting out of it? So I am hoping that makes sense. If it doesn't, please keep asking questions, but we're going to move to the next sign, the street signs example, so I can give you a little bit more of something to sink your teeth into, because there's so many different types of events that you do. And these were just two that popped into my head because they're basic events that most student affairs or student activities professionals have put on or seen. So the street signs, you want to create and grab and go novelty that is fun for students. That's your basic category. Your basic boring purpose, but at least you're trying, is to create a personalized novelty experience for students. So what you'll find in the bold gathering column is that a lot of the different things for the reason student activities and student engagement exists can go into multiple types of events. So I just want to really clearly state that it is very possible that one of the specific purposes in the last column could always be to give students an evening activity that presents an alternative to alcohol or partying. There are reasons that we exist, and it's not just for sense of belonging. Of course, that's probably the most important factor in this, but we do want to make sure that part of our job is to give students that place where they are safe and there isn't alcohol involved or drugs or the same amount of peer pressures that may be presented by social activities put on by peers. So with the street signs, we are looking into, again, the purpose that's specific and unique and disputable. The students are coming out of it, hopefully, they can create something that helps give them ownership to their space. So by you creating a street sign that says your name, something about where you're from, your identity, a value, anything like that. These are two ways that students could come out of this event with that intentionality, that specificity, and they're coming out and they feel maybe they've connected to someone who has a similar street sign. Maybe they've been able to share their identity or values with others. Or maybe two roommates are going and they're more connected now because they have that ownership over their space. So this chart is my way to do this. My students a lot of the time make mind maps with this that include their event details. And they're very creative. So I did want to put up that a mind map is also a really good way to go about this because it allows for more creativity and flow. But I'm just a very type A, very true colors gold, where I very much look for the charts. Are there questions about the chart or about this intentionality piece that I can answer? So I did want to leave time to chat at the end. So if there are questions or comments or anything like that, I'm more than happy to answer them. I personally, again, suggest I'll include my resources here. Well, my contact information is here. So my email is down here. And as I said, I am the director of student engagement and would love to see anyone. We can set up any type of meeting and I can give you more resources if you need. But again, some of my resources at the end are here. So The Art of Gathering and How We Meet and Why It Matters is the book by Priya Parker that I highly suggest. It goes very much into more detail, but I thought it was super important with the work that I'm doing that the intentionality piece was first. So, and I know that we had a pretty short amount of time. So at times I definitely felt like there's a little bit of rushing on my part. So I do apologize. But yeah, so are there any questions that I can answer?
Hi, Amanda. This is Ashley.
Hi, Ashley.
From Lord's University. I really appreciated your presentation. I thought it was an amazing topic. Can you just share with me really quick, how do you combat this very early on? I mean, during orientation, are you responsible for that on your campus?
So I am one of the key players on my campus. Yes, I will go back to the resources, Michelle. I am one of the key players of orientation on my campus, yes. And so we do work on this right away. This is something that when students come in, we're very specific about what we're covering with them and how we're connecting them to different students, different groups. We actually are in the process of creating different resources to also help almost play matchmaker with students to help them find a sense of belonging during pre-orientation and when they get back for orientation. So we're actually in the process of creating, for example, like a little personality quiz that helps match values and interests to the different student organizations we have, for example. And a lot of my research definitely helps that sense of belonging piece. So the intentionality, all of those pieces go into how are we creating activities for students. So for example, there's a time that I've used like a escape room box type of game where we're giving a lot of different resources in a puzzle game. So we start early by doing a lot of gamification, and a lot of the pieces where we're looking at all of we list our events just like I did on that chart, and we find how we're able to do that right away. So I know that was a little bit off. I hope that answered your question, but it is key that you have to grandfather it in. If you aren't being super intentional, you have to grandfather it in, where I think a lot of us in the field, especially as we've transitioned from activities to engagement, in even just in the name, we have to be more intentional and we have to show and prove constantly why we're so important on campus. So even if you just have your list of orientation events and you start with your first years and you just go from there and you just list like, this is the purpose of this. And again, you just keep those three ingredients to find that bold gathering. So that's definitely key. But with our older students, some of them are just not interested in these types of practices, and we can't win everybody over. And a lot of I've had students that are just like, I can't handle this. They're like, this is too much. I'm not interested in coming and being like so connected with each other. So it's really just taking it to the best of your ability, but also taking it with a grain of salt, and just pick from the intentionality chart what really makes sense for you in your campus. So
Thank
as
you.
far as the engagement peers, job descriptions and roles, we have we have a group of about 10 students, and they work in different categories. And what they do is they're split and they oversee different, we have networks of student organizations on our campus. So we have like a recreation, a leadership, a service, etc. And we have a student engagement peer oversees each of those networks and helps them program and plan events. But then in turn, they also program and plan events for our office as well. So it's not just the staff who are putting on events. We do have a program board that functions as an entity of our office as well, but that is the students definitely help with the peer-to-peer. Yeah, so huge struggle with burnout from being on Zoom. So does anyone have any tips for being successful on other campuses? If you do, please feel free to type in the chat. Vanessa had a great question. I think one of the key purposes is that everyone is burnout from Zoom, and it really matters if you're on or off campus. I think that's a really big key piece here. But the Zoom has definitely been really, really rough for sure. Well, we are at time, so if anybody wants to stick around and ask any questions or have anything to talk about, you're welcome to. But if not, feel free to go on to your next session so you're not late. I thank you all for coming and bearing with me through my nerves at the beginning. Have a wonderful day.